the list of people who were attending, and it was originally envisaged that the webinar would be targeted at people in the original event back in April was targeted at people in the greater Dublin area. Obviously the webinar was targeted at people within Ireland, but as I go through the participants, I recognize a number of international names. I'm delighted to welcome Hardeep Ray from Kaleidoscope Investments in the UK. Hardeep spoke at a conference that we organised. There you go. Good to see you.
Good to see you too, sir.
And you're very welcome. You spoke at a conference that we organised a couple of years back. And Hardeep, while we're waiting, Hardeep, you just want to tell us a little about your business, about your activities?
Sure. Well, I didn't expect that, Tom.
I didn't either. I hadn't intended.
Talk about being put on the spot. Well, Kaleidoscope was formed about 5 years ago to help disabled people that wanted to start their own businesses. You know, I have a severely disabled child, and he introduced me into the world of disability, so to speak. So I learned that, you know, from my current partner, Shane, that people with disabilities really struggle to raise funding for their businesses. And then that's how Kaleidoscope was formed. You know, and we did a very big project, as Thomas said, you know, for the last 4 or 5 years, we've been really researching the market, doing a few investments, learning a great deal along the way. And so, yeah, so we're very much here, very supportive of Tom, of course, and the initiative. And here to listen. And it's not just about the money, actually. A lot of the time it's about the expertise. As you know, Tom, we've spoken about mentoring a lot, and actually getting the mentoring right for people with disabilities is absolutely critical. And as much as we have learned over this period of time, we continue to learn, you know, every single day, every single disability, even if it's the same disability, has got a different string attached to it. So you're constantly learning, but yeah, it's a phenomenal space. Very excited to be in it.
And you're most welcome, and also thank you for agreeing to speak at a future webinar that we'll be organising in the autumn. And we're delighted you could join us. Thank you so much, Harry.
Thank you, Thomas.
I'm also delighted to welcome Brian Aird from Canada. Brian, I'm not sure what time in the morning it is there, but you're up bright and early, and Brian co-authored the report with me on pathways to entrepreneurship for people with disability. So Brian, just a shout out to you, and you're also very welcome. And I also recognize some names from South America. So yeah, what began as a local event has certainly drawn interest from far and wide. So look, I'm going to make a start because we've got a lot to get through, and I want to welcome everybody. It's amazing the level of interest that has been shown in this particular webinar and in what we're looking to achieve. I just want to give you some background. This webinar is first in a series of webinars. We intend hosting more beginning in September, running through to December, each featuring different specific issues relating to starting a business, but tailored towards the particular and unique challenges that people with disability might face in starting their own business. The initiative is part of the Dublin Regional Enterprise Plan to 2020, and it comes under their strategic 5 objective around the inclusion of all communities with regard to employment and self-employment. And that Dublin Regional Enterprise Plan is driven by the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment, as it is now known since last Saturday, who've really not only supported but driven both the plan and this particular initiative. Supporting them has been the enterprise agencies such as the local enterprise offices and Enterprise Ireland, and also a range of other organisations and government departments, which are too numerous to mention here. But I assure you, we're grateful to all for their support and participation in what's happening. The webinar is only one of the activities around this initiative. There's other activities happening also, but more about that in the autumn series. I'd like to thank Declan McCulloch, who is the regional coordinator of the Dublin Regional Enterprise Plan, and Declan has been hugely proactive in making this event happen. And also to Jean McDonough of the Open Doors Initiative, who are the hosts of this particular webinar, or thanks to them. The Open Doors Initiative works with disadvantaged communities in 3 particular areas, one of which is people with disability. And finally, my thanks to Alan Hatton, who is the technical person looking after us all today, and because certainly that expertise isn't with me. So our thanks to Alan on that. And actually the main thanks are to our guest speakers, who are Niamh and Matt, who will be talking shortly. Before we get into the discussion, can I just offer some guidelines around protocol for the webinar? It's up to you to turn whether you want to have the cameras on or off. That's your choice. But I would suggest to you that you set the view settings to speaker view, which is on the top right corner of the screen. And that way the speaker will be in full view in the center of the screen throughout the conversation. So yeah, throughout all of it, make sure your microphone is turned off, so that there's no background noises intruding upon the speakers. And what's going to happen is I'm going to hand over to Matt first, and then to Niamh. They'll tell you about their stories. Then I'm going to do a Q&A session with them. And then for the last 15 minutes, there'll be an open Q&A. But what I'm asking you to do is, rather than raising your hand, put your question in the chat room, and I'll feed the question to the speakers directly, as that would make life a lot easier for me as moderator. We'll try to get to as many questions as possible during that last 15 minutes. So keep the mic off throughout, please. And then if you've got any video quality issues, what you can do is maybe log out and come back in again. Alan will be minding everybody in terms of entry into the webinar. So feel free to go back out and come back in again. So I think that's all the house rules in terms of protocol for the webinar. Okay, just to set a short context to what we're doing. As mentioned earlier, Brian Aird and I co-authored a report that was published earlier this year on pathways to entrepreneurship for people with disability. And within that report, there was a story told by Eddie Hennessy, who's also I've noted, who's participating on this event, who's attending. Shout out to you, Eddie. And Eddie told his story about the challenges that he faces as someone with disability in being self-employed, and particularly the additional costs involved for him. One of the kind of findings from the report was that 13.5% of the population have a disability, which is a percentage that is far higher than the general population would perceive. And the rate of employment and the rate of pay for people with disability is of concern not only to ourselves, but to obviously government as well. On a personal note, I would be concerned with the COVID crisis and the what I suspect will be an economic recession in the coming months, that excuse me, that people with disability might suffer disproportionately in terms of unemployment and in terms of people being laid off, or even maybe being unable to work due to underlying conditions, health conditions. So I think we got a major challenge up ahead in terms of unemployment. And I think self-employment has got to be part of that solution. One of the good pieces of news that came from last Saturday's new government is the announcement that of a new senior minister for children and disability. Previously that was a junior post, and now it's a senior post. So maybe our timing is good to make action happen. In terms of tailored supports, the report highlighted that there are very little tailored supports available in Ireland. And in my email to participants earlier in the week, I included a booklet from Helen McQuillan that was published a number of years back, which is a very good resource for people with disability who are looking at starting their own business. And I would suggest to anyone with an interest in this area that they would read that publication, and the link was in the email that I sent out previously, but I'll be sending it out again after this webinar. The report also highlighted that there are additional distinctive challenges involved, and I suppose that's what we want to explore with our two speakers. So I'm delighted to welcome McCann from Access Earth and Niamh Malone from Fatigue Friend, who will share their experiences of starting their own businesses and the positives and negatives of their entrepreneurial journey. So without further ado, can I welcome Matt McCann of Access Earth, and I'll come off screen now and hand it over to Matt. Matt, it's all yours, and you're very welcome.
Yeah, thanks a million, Tom, and Declan and Alan and the Open Doors and the long list of people that you had also thanked about organising this event. I'm really thrilled to be here just to kind of give, in part, I suppose, what advice I have for people when starting their own business, and sort of to give a little bit of an insight into my journey as well and sort of where this started. So I guess by way of a bit of background and context, I have cerebral palsy, so it means that I use a rollator, a walking frame, to kind of get around the environment. And I'd found, growing up in Dublin, for example, in sort of the early to late 90s, was that there were challenges for me in the built environment, and going to school and college and things like that. And I'd always found that really for me, why I'd started Access Earth as a bit of a background in terms of what we do is we provide accessibility information about buildings and public places. And this was very much born out of my personal experience in terms of, trying to go on holiday somewhere, finding there was a hotel that wasn't accessible, or looking to go out with friends in college and find that restaurants had bathrooms that were down a flight of stairs. And I think from that experience in college, there was a way to kind of, how could I turn this experience into sort of a sustainable business? And one of the sort of main, I guess, catalysts from this was, I think it was like a college competition in the Microsoft Imagine Cup, and how, can you use technology to change the world in which you live in a positive way? And that's something that I'd really kind of latched onto and thought, okay, this is something that I'm really passionate about. I get to combine my computer science and kind of software engineering knowledge, and try and build a business that doesn't just help me, but also helps, you said, Tom, there, that's 13.5% of the population of Ireland have a disability. I mean, really, if you count worldwide, everyone who's affected in some form by disability, including their family, friends, and colleagues, you're looking at I'd say easily half the world's population are affected both directly and indirectly. So it's a huge potential market that, you know, that supports need to be available for and need to be catered to. And so, but one of the challenges I had when starting out was, you know, I was a computer science student, and kind of the idea was a noble one, and it was very much a, how do I turn this into a business? And the advice I would kept receiving in the beginning was that, you know, this is an idea that's worth doing, and it's your personal experience on this that's the most important. You know, you have to be, whatever the business is, you have to be passionate about the problem that you're solving. And if you have personal experience to it, then that's all the more reason you literally live and breathe what you're trying to solve. And I suppose from that, it's some of the advice I'd give would be make sure that, you know, you don't have to do everything alone. You know, I had spent my time in college, we got friends together to do this project, and then once I'd gotten support from the local enterprise office upon graduating, and then later on Enterprise Ireland, it was very clear to me that I didn't have to do this all alone. You know, I had no idea how to build a business plan. I had no idea how to do financial projections, and it was with support from Alex's local enterprise office and some of the feasibility studies from Enterprise Ireland that I was able to sort of build out from an idea of what we wanted to do to achieve to get our first sort of level of kind of seed funding, and then to in the last couple of years start to kind of expand out the team and to really kind of turn this into a sustainable business. And you know, the idea has changed and morphed over the years. From the core idea of what we're trying to do has not changed, but it's more, how do you make that sustainable? And I think that that's a challenge that not just, you know, people with disabilities starting a business are going to face. It's a challenge that all entrepreneurs essentially face, is how do I turn this idea that I know has huge potential into a sustainable business that has revenue, that enables you to grow a team and to scale this out globally. And really, that's again where sort of support from local enterprise office and Enterprise Ireland in particular came in, but also to not just to look at the government supports, but to look at supports that are available, particularly if you're in, say, tech. You know, we're lucky that, you know, Microsoft and Google have one of their European headquarters here, and as such, we're able to go into their startup support programs as well, that we're able to provide advice on not just how do you make this sustainable, but also how do you you know, tell your story in a clear and compelling way. And that was really an interesting point for me, because I was always very much speaking from my own personal experience, but it's also about how you sort of project that out and are telling it to the customers and the people that you're looking to help in a way that sort of makes sense. And I guess for me, again, another point of advice about people who are looking to start a business that have a disability. I mean, in a sense, I know I've been a problem solver my entire life, just in terms of what I've had to, you know, growing up with walking around with a rollator trying to get into buildings and things like that. It's always about not what you can't do, but like, how can you adapt, or how can you actually just look to get this done in whatever way possible, whether it's, you know, asking for help, getting downstairs, or looking to make improvements. Like, essentially, people with disabilities make great entrepreneurs because we're already inbuilt great problem solvers. And essentially, like, it boils down to, that's what an entrepreneur is. It's solving a problem. And essentially, yeah, it's just all about how do you channel in all the advice you're going to get. You're going to get a ton of advice about starting it out, how to make it sustainable, some advice on where revenue is going to come from. But the main thing you have to do is you have to realize that the core idea that you want to start, you know, there's something to it, and you just kind of have to take in the advice that sort of helps you build on that. And I sort of noticed that now, you know, now we're at a team of four full-time people, 2 part-time in different parts of the world. And I think that to think that this has come from a college project, a little idea I had, has it's been quite humbling, to be honest. But we also have our challenges too, and like long-term sustainable funding is something that we're looking to now solve. And I think being in the COVID sort of situation that we're in now, it's all about how can you look to adapt your business to kind of come out the other end stronger for it. And we're looking at a number of different ways of doing that. But yeah, essentially, my advice just boils down to that same point: is if you have an idea that you're passionate about, and your inbuilt determination will come across like that. And there are supports available, whether it's through the government supports, or also through the likes of Microsoft and Google. So there's a myriad of different advisors that are available to you. It's like, just essentially, yeah, don't be afraid to ask for help into how you can really turn your business from an idea into a business. And yeah, I'm sort of coming to the end of my talking points, really. But essentially, yeah, like we're now in a space that we're looking to raise funds for the next 18 months. We've developed the idea from, initially it was about hotel booking, to now we're serving a vertical with sports, because I'm a huge football fan myself, and I know going to stadiums, accessibility was a problem for me. So we're now catering to football and larger venues, which we're looking to really tackle that now in the next year, based on the advisory network that we've been able to build up. And yeah, I think that's me, essentially. Thank you very much for listening, and I'm looking forward to any of the questions.
Thank you very much, and a particularly positive start to the conversation. You raised a number of points there, which I'll pick up with you in our Q&A after Niamh has spoken. I've got to remind people actually that the webinar is being recorded and will be available through the Open Doors initiative after we're finished. I'll send a link to the recording to people. We're going to finish the recording at the end of the Q&A session between myself and Niamh and Matt, so that any questions that have come from the audience afterwards will be just between ourselves and won't be for public viewing afterwards. Okay, so it's just the conversation between Matt, Niamh and I, and their presentations are recorded, not any of the questions coming from yourselves. Okay, so Niamh, I'll hand over to you, and I understand you have a PowerPoint presentation as well, and Alan will help with setting that up.
Sorry, just get on to the next one. Just get on to the next slide. So hello. Anyway, my story is that I used to work as a clinical nurse specialist in stroke rehabilitation, and I had a subarachnoid hemorrhage, which was a ruptured aneurysm in my brain 7 years ago, which left me with ongoing cognitive impairments and chronic fatigue. So when I went home, I found it very hard to adjust to life in the community. I had a type of amnesia where basically I'd wake up in the morning time and I'd spend the whole day piecing together what my day, where I actually was at and what had actually happened to me. And it was like as if basically someone came along at night time and scattered all the pieces all over the floor, and then I'd start all again the next day and try and piece it all together again. In addition to that, I had limited self-awareness, which meant that when I went home, I thought I was fine when I wasn't. And in addition to that, I thought that basically everything, I could see where everything was and I could tell you where everything was, but I couldn't associate with it. It was like I was put into somebody else's life. So it was very confusing and very disorientating. And in addition to that, I also have aphasia, which is a speech and language problem. And also for me, it affects my writing. So I tend to write around what I want to say. And if I'm tired, I end up just talking rubbish and not able to communicate properly at all. And on top of all of that, I had chronic fatigue, where basically even just as simple as rolling over in the bed, I'd actually fall asleep halfway through going to sleep. and going back to sleep, or having a cup of tea. And basically, I could only drink quarter cups of tea, because if I drank a full cup of tea, I'd end up spilling it all over myself, and I'd actually fall asleep while actually drinking it. So at the time, my daughter was 12 years of age, and my family didn't really see the whole significance of my stroke, because I looked actually fine. So she became my carer, and so we lived on sandwiches and cereal and tea for 6 months, because that's basically all we could actually do. I couldn't cook or anything like that at all. So after 9 months, I said enough is enough. So I set up this psychological motivation program to get myself some way back on track. And with my limited self-awareness, I thought, this is great. I'll be back to work within 2 years, and that's it. And I'll be back to my life the way it was before, because I used to love my job. So I wrote down all the things that were wrong with me, and basically, and I planned out these plans that I'd have weekly. Sorry, first of all, I decided daily goals. Then I realized, no, that's actually not the case. Then they turned to weekly goals, and then they turned to monthly goals. But I realized over time that this is what I need to do for my recovery, and this is how I need to pace myself. So at the end of the 6 months, I realized that I couldn't return to my job as a clinical nurse specialist, and I had to look for something else. So people said I was very accepting of the fact that this is actually had happened to me, and said, what did I do? So I told them about what I developed. So they said, why don't you develop an app to help other people with this situation, and get them back on track and accepting their life? So somebody referred me to the local enterprise office, which is where I went to, and I was informed that they don't fund standalone apps. So fortunately, I had some money myself, and I actually self-funded it, and it got out there, and there was over 200 downloads in 1 year, mostly word by mouth. I got loads of feedback, which was brilliant, and they said that this was something that they thought was a good idea, but basically there was too much information on it, which when I look at it now, it actually is. They also said that they wanted healthcare professionals to be involved, so that they could actually see what was going on with the person, and they wanted more to look at chronic fatigue rather than to be looking at too much stuff going on at the one time. So I said, fine, this is grand. So then I kind of said to myself, hang on a second, that sounds familiar to me, chronic fatigue. And I realized that I was actually living with chronic fatigue due to my limited self-awareness. I really had passed me by. So for me, I look fine. I look perfectly fine. You wouldn't think I actually had a disability or had a chronic fatigue. So I remembered neuroplasticity, which is where your nerve endings reknit themselves after a brain injury, and they have to relay messages around the body, and it's burning up energy in your brain, which causes fatigue, and that's where I'm coming from with my fatigue. Can I go on to the next slide now? So basically what I decided to do then was I started jotting down what my symptoms were, and what I felt like before I actually had my fatigue, what afterwards, all the triggers that needed to be involved with it. And then I held focus groups on paper, not me taking part in it because I didn't want bias. And other people with chronic conditions got back to me and said, yes, this fatigue model is kind of like early warning stages, and we can see where this would be really benefit us, and we could map and track through our fatigue process. So that's what it is. It's a predictive tool that prevents full-blown episodes of chronic fatigue through a series of alerts based on recognizing early warning stages of fatigue onset. And then in January 2018, I got on the Female High Flyers program, which I thought, this is brilliant, and it really was beneficial to me. Gave me 3 months basically of giving me the idea of a business case document, and gave me much more focus on what I needed to do. And at the end of the 3 months, I won the most potential to invest and basically scale globally. So I said, this is great. And then I got onto the European Validator program, which is an e-health initiative. And that was for a further 3 months. And I got to, at the time, I had a working prototype, and that enabled me to basically also bring we went on the tour around a few countries, and I was able to validate the prototype online as well. I was not online in other countries as well as in Ireland. And then I went and approached Dublin Business Innovation Centre, and I said, you know, I've been on the acceleration program, I've been on the Female High Flyers program, and I was informed that basically that the e-health was only in the first year and they really didn't recognise it. So really the only way that people would invest in me was if I went through Enterprise Ireland and the Competitive Startup Fund, which I've attempted 7 times to fill in and still haven't been successful in filling it in, even though I've got people helping me do it. As soon as I mention the fact that I've got cognitive impairments and chronic fatigue, it just seems to shut down, and that's it. People don't see me, they just see the disability. So in May 2019, I took time out because I had to move from where I was living, And I ended up with no fixed abode for 9 months, which was the best experience that ever happened to me. It certainly made me very resilient and maybe give me time to plan and think what I needed to do. And it was around this time then that Tom recommended me to Kaleidoscope Investments. And for me, this was a lifesaver for me, because basically there's the funding there, but they also see the person and listen to what you are, who you are. They listen to what your disabilities are, and they listen to what my cognitive, it was the only first time ever that somebody asked me what exactly were my cognitive impairments and how did this impact on my life. Nobody else ever asked that question. So basically from there, a company have contacted me called Fatigue. They're from Switzerland, and they're applying for Horizon 2020 funding that 2 months ago, and we've started collaborating. And they are looking at like your pulse rate, but also more deeper ones. Am I still online? Basically, so they're actually looking at collaborating with me, and we're looking through the Horizon 2020 to do the funding for this. And I'm on the advisory board as a fatigue specialist, and they ask my advice all the time. So they see me for who I actually am, which is huge. Economist on board, so we're doing a whole new business case document, and this will happen in the end of it. Sorry, I should have said, is that they'll collaborate, they'll integrate their pulse rates onto my fatigue model, and from there we're going to go for a European validation, so it'll be seen as a medical device for Europe. And in the meantime, while I'm waiting for all that to be done, I've now started writing my autobiography, which I plan to have out by October of this year. Thank you.
Very good. Thanks a million, Niamh. Niamh, will you just do me a favour, please? Will you just talk me through the Swiss organisation again? We just last...
Yeah, I know I got lost, did I?
Yeah, just for a moment. And but it was just who the organisation is and how you connected with them.
What happened was they connected me on LinkedIn, and they were they're a Swiss company that are looking at pulse rates. Where they started, interesting enough, was in football. And basically what they found out that was when people were when they had fatigue problems, their pulse waves went down, and then when they were back to normal, the pulse waves went up. So they decided to expand and look at this further, and they now have for more deep pulse waves, so they can check for blood pressure. At the moment, if you do a clinical regulatory trial for blood pressure, the person has to wear a 24-hour blood pressure monitor for the time that they're being tested. And I don't know if anyone else here has ever had a 24-hour blood pressure monitor, but it's very uncomfortable. So basically with this, their pulse waves, they can change the setting on the pulse waves to actually pick up that blood pressure pulse, which is huge. And also they can actually look for oxygen levels as well with their with the pulse rate from that. So the plan for it is that they'll calibrate their pulse waves to my early warning stages, and it enable then healthcare professionals to map and track the progress of a person through their early warning stages and through a chronic fatigue state, and then be able to adjust medications or whatever they need to do accordingly within this. So that's where that's coming from. And
Niamh, when will this be available for sale?
I would envisage probably in the next 2 years. There's a huge big study they're doing. They've already got collaboration from about 7 countries. So it's quite, and the PhD is they've got a PhD from King's College University that's actually carrying it. They're looking at prediction, prevention, intervention, and treatment. And they're looking at biomarkers of fatigue. Like when they came to me, I said, sure, I wouldn't have a hope of ever basically being able to compete against somebody like this. Do you know what I mean? And literally, the agreement was what they wanted from me was they wanted me on the advisory board because they saw me as a fatigue specialist. They wanted to build my MVP. They had no problem with that at all. And then they want to collaborate with me, so this will be integrated, and we can disseminate out from the conditions, the health conditions that were there, out into strokes, head injuries, and everything from burnout to anything. So it'll be for every person living with chronic fatigue. So that's the plan.
And for between now and then, Niamh, how will you generate income? And I suppose how?
Well, basically, what I'm doing is I'm going on the advisory board, and they've agreed to give me a salary for that. And that will be that will take up quite a lot of time, because like for every part of the research study that's been carried out, it all has to go through the advisory board. There's only 6 of us on it. So there's a health economist, there's a behavioural change person, there's me, there's the fellow, the PhD student, and then there's 2 others. I don't know what I think they've got it, they're getting a patient as well. So what I'm doing is I'm writing my book, and that's where I'm going to generate my income, and that's it. I've already got people interested in this, and I've got a few other authors that are actually helping me as to where would be the best way to actually get this book out there, and that's it. So, and I've already got 2 other books lined up as well. People are interested in writing with me as well. So, yeah, a lot's going on.
Fantastic. And Niamh, I see from the chat room, there's both of you have inspired quite a lot of people, and people are wondering about web addresses and contacts and stuff like that. If someone wants to contact you, you don't have a website
No.
at the moment, you know. So
no, I don't actually, not at the moment. No.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, my whole business went. I had to get rid of. I used to be called Brainy App, but unfortunately, earlier this year, I just had to basically just dissolve all of that because I really wasn't getting anywhere with it. So now I'm going to set myself up as a Fatigue Friend, and basically I'll be able to get. I've got a letter from the Swiss company saying that they're going to collaborate with me and build my MVP. So we're linking to Hardeep there with all of that, and I'm going to link back to him later in the year with a kind of a meeting between the whole lot of us and see where we can go from there.
Okay, so people could connect with you through LinkedIn.
Yeah, and also through the Brainy App at gmail.com. You can contact me there, no problem at all.
Okay, so Brainy App.
Brainy App. It's the one that the email that I gave you. Yeah. That you linked
so
to.
Brainy App. That's
BRAI. It's BRAINEYAPP1 @gmail.com.
Okay, for anyone that wants to connect with you. And Matt, it's the same for you, because people have been inspired by you and want to know your web address and, you know, how to connect with you. Do you want to give us your web address and contact details?
Yeah, so either connect with me through LinkedIn or reach out at our website, or accessearth.com or access.earth. Both will work.
Okay, and just a couple of questions that were beginning to pop up there, Matt, was you know, one person was asking, I've got my own life coaching business, but having difficulty getting, you know, where does one go, and then where does go for support of that nature?
In terms of where, from my perspective, it'd be the local enterprise office. Protocol there, like they'll listen to your story and hear you out. At least from my perspective, they've been great. Just figuring out where your local enterprise office is first, I think.
Yeah, and just to make people aware, every county and every city has its own local enterprise office. It's not able to support all types of businesses in terms of financial support, but it can certainly help people to develop their business idea, to examine the value of their business idea, because there's no point in starting, Matt, if there's not a market there for your business. So
yeah.
How did you evaluate your business idea?
Well, initially it was from my personal experience, and then I did some sort of digging around into how large the kind of essentially accessibility market is, and you know, based on attended a few conferences on the back of, I think it was the market research grant that we'd used with the local enterprise office, and I had an opportunity to speak at the Zero Project conference at the UN in Vienna, and that's where that started. Essentially, it's half the world's population is affected in some way by accessibility, whether it's physical accessibility or otherwise. And I think that was really sort of an eye-opening experience for me, just to see that it's not just me that's affected by this. It's a huge global market. And
in terms then of expansion, Matt, you mentioned that you're expanding the business into other markets. You're looking for additional funding. There's 2 questions there. One, how did you kind of evaluate the new market? You know, like that kind of made you decide to go in that direction, and where are you looking for funding for that expansion?
Yeah, so in terms of where we had initially planned our initial customer base to come from sport, initially came from, obviously I big fan of sport, and began to realize that there were some clubs that were in different countries that were dealing with accessibility in slightly different ways. So we, one of our strategic partners is CAFE, which is the Center for Accessible Football in Europe. They're essentially UEFA's accessibility arm. So we work with them to identify where the particular countries that would benefit most from extra information being provided. And then through there, we work directly with the clubs. So essentially, yeah, it was through that. It was initial cold email we'd sent out to them saying, this is what we do, this is how I feel we can help. And then, yeah, it just led to, we've been part of a number of different European grant proposals with them now, as well as, getting to talk to, some of the big football clubs in Europe. So that's been fantastic. But in terms of funding and kind of trying to move this forward, to drive this forward, is that we're looking to really raise money now, sort of in the next few months, to enable us to get through the next 18 months. And as I say, get football back, when football's back in front of fans, to essentially enable us to capitalize on that opportunity.
Okay, a question for each of you, and Matt, I'll start with you, given that we're chatting. What do you think are the additional or distinctive challenges that somebody with a disability faces when looking to start up their own business, or even manage their own business?
So it's a kind of a practical one. When I saw the question came up in the chat, was, I know for me starting out the business, there's a level of fear, because I was on the disability benefit, and there's a level of sort of apprehension about, there's an extra level of risk of, well, if I go on, get paid by this business, how will that affect the benefits? But also, like, in some ways it's difficult to get onto the system. There'd be a level of fear of, well, what happens if I go off and then the business fails? If the business fails, how difficult would it be for me to get back onto this? And I realized that, like, the support structure is there. It's essentially the disability benefits are there to support the person, and essentially that they want to see you get into employment. And I'd realized that by sort of telling them my story, that essentially they're there to easily allow you to be fast-tracked back onto the benefits if the business does fail. So that was a big initial sticking point for me, because while I was happy to pay other people in the business, I was reluctant to pay myself, essentially. And that was a big challenge for me to kind of get that over. It's like, well, the business is only sustainable if it can sustain the whole team. And that was the initial challenge I had.
That's a really good point, Matt, because all of the international research highlights that what's termed the welfare benefit trap is one of the biggest barriers to people with disabilities starting their own business. A fear of losing their income and also, as you say, of taking a long time to re-enter should things not work out for them. And I think it has to be part of any solution. Niamh, what do you think are the additional distinctive challenges that people with disability might face in starting their own business?
For me, what I found was trying to find a co-founder. That was a big difficulty for me. Basically, when I went in and I asked and approached about where to find a co-founder, I was always kind of told, oh, you'll know when the right one comes along and all this sort of thing, because they'll help you and they'll work with you. But like, where do you start? So basically, a lot of people gave me advice to go onto LinkedIn. So that's where I went on to try and find a co-founder. And people were like, oh, I don't know, maybe you should look at this, maybe you should look at that. So basically, that's one area that I found was very difficult, finding a co-founder. The other area I found difficulty was with the co-founder as well. When I actually found a co-founder, some of them turned out to be, like, as you call, sharks at the end of the day. And basically, all I needed was a facilitator to be there to negotiate with me, to kind of say, just because I've got a disability doesn't mean that I'm basically don't know how to run my business. I do know, I'm totally aware of my limitations, but you're here to help me run this business. And what a lot of the time what actually happened was, it would start great and we get on great together, and then over time they begin to say, oh, you know, I know what your business is about now. I think you're just better off to go into consultancy role in your business, and I'll run the rest of it, because you're not going to be able to keep up to the pace because you've got chronic fatigue. And I'd be going, no, I can keep up to the pace. I just basically need you to do X, Y, and Z. And it became an awful panic and overwhelming, because I could see that somebody was taking the business away from me and my idea, and was trying to change it into something else, which is what I didn't want. And a lot of people with chronic fatigue were saying, it's very important for you to keep your idea going, because this is what we believe in. And this was being taken from me, and I didn't know where to go to find a facilitator. I mean, I contacted occupational therapists, I contacted the patient platform, IPOSI, I don't know if you know that organization, they didn't know of anyone. I contacted different advocacy groups like the Irish Heart Foundation, they didn't know of anyone either. So it was just a huge gap in the market that I thought, if there's somebody there just initially to be on my side to say, you know, this is what Niamh means, this is what she wants, it would have been fine. I have a good mentor who the advice that he gave me was to have an escape clause, that after 3 months, if you don't feel like this is working out, that you can get out of it, and that's it. And that's what I do with anyone that I started with, a co-founder. And I also get them to sign an NDA, which I think is really vital. But I think that basically, if there was some kind of somebody there as a facilitator to help with people with disabilities, especially when you've got, I don't know whether it's different from my point of view, and people with cognitive impairments, sometimes we get very bogged down on what we're trying to say, or we may come across, we don't know what we're talking about, but we do. And the other thing, what I would suggest is, with the challenge of me, was filling in the Enterprise Ireland forms, the competitive starter funds. They're very difficult to fill in if you've actually got a speech and language problem or a writing problem. And I think there should be a choice some way on it, that for, say, like for someone like me, that I could have the additional information to be able to send in a PowerPoint presentation, or to send in a verbal side of things, or for somebody else, I don't know, for other people, how that would benefit as well. It just gives me a better chance along with everyone else. I'm not looking for any perks or advantages at the end of the day. I just would like the idea, the opportunity to fill in an application to the best of my ability. And then if you don't think it's up to whatever the mark is, I'm perfectly fine and happy with that, and I can walk away. So I suppose they were the two areas that I would have actually see as a challenge initially.
Very good, Niamh. And I suppose what, like, the message there is that in terms of support organisations, whether they're enterprise support organisations